But tonight we've got Luke Nye talking about piloting on the harbour. Welcome, Luke. Thanks for coming along tonight. And I think we can get started and get underway. And I'll just introduce Luke formally. Luke's career in the industry started when he was a teenager, working odd jobs on various small commercial and recreational vessels around Sydney Harbour. He worked firstly as a deckhand on Sydney ferries and as a casual tug and barge master for 5 years before leaving Sydney to pursue a career at sea. After starting as a cadet on crude oil and product tankers, he worked through the officer ranks on a variety of supply vessels, anchor handlers and tankers, eventually being promoted to master and spending his last 2 years at sea in command of a general cargo ship. Luke has been a marine pilot in Sydney and Port Botany since 2017. So Luke, over to you. We're looking forward to what you've got to tell us tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, JT. So, yeah, thanks everyone for joining tonight. I usually present at the pre-season briefings for the racing crowd. For those that may have seen me there, I usually get about 10 minutes of very structured time. So to be able to talk to you about piloting in more detail is a joy for me, and I hope it's an enjoyable presentation for yourselves. So pilots, everyone would be familiar on the harbour with the sight here of a large ship moving around the harbour. You'll see the pilot vessel out the front there, and most people would know the pilot's role. Some may not. Contrary to popular belief, we're not on the vessel with the words pilot emblazoned over it. You'll see the ship flying this flag, hotel, when there's a pilot on board, and pilot vessel takes us out to these ships at sea, where we pilot in Sydney and Port Botany as Sydney pilots. It's about 4 miles off the coast is the pilot boarding ground. Pilot vessel takes us out. We climb up via pilot ladder in our port. There are other transfer arrangements in other ports. This is Newcastle, where they have land on helicopters. The trade up in Newcastle is primarily large bulk carriers, so most of their vessels can be boarded by a helicopter landing on the deck where they have adequate room, and then when tankers and cruise ships and other vessels where that's not suitable come to their port, the pilot ladder is the only option, and they transfer as we do via boat and ladder. This is the winch down arrangement, which is used in some ports around the world. So Durban, and now in Melbourne, there's a pilotage operator that they do winch down transfers, which has been canvassed in Sydney a couple of times previously, well before my time, and it is something that's continuously there as an option. And there are operators now looking to do this, expand winch down arrangements right across many other ports in Australia, and I'll discuss that in some more detail a little later. So pilots, why pilots? There's pilots employed in all ports around the world. As you can see here in this slide, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal as well, Port Hedland up there in the top left, Singapore Straits down on the bottom left there. So there's different iterations. With our port, we have pilots that pilot to all berths and all facilities within the port. In Singapore, you have pilots that pilot to the anchorage, then you'll have berth pilots that pilot to a particular island or a facility. In Australia, in Dampier, there are pilots that are particular to a certain facility or a certain company. So the Woodside pilots pilot to ships to the Woodside berths, and the Rio Tinto guys pilot to the Rio Tinto berths, etc., etc. So there's many different iterations of pilotage up at the Great Barrier Reef, Torres Straits. There's a couple of companies up there that simply pilot through those waters. So what's the pilot's role? The pilot is basically in charge or managing the very high risk operation of navigating a vessel in and out of a port, including berthing and unberthing that vessel. In Sydney, a commercial vessel over 30 metres is required to have a pilot. There's obviously a lot of commercial vessels over 30 metres operating on the harbour that don't have pilots. So the masters of the Manly ferries, for instance, have a local knowledge certificate, which means they're exempt from pilotage. And there's some commercial vessels, like, for instance, the bunker barges and others over 80 metres, that have exempt masters that have done some training with the pilots and have been checked in and out of the port and are deemed to hold an exemption certificate. The pilot is employed to protect the port's infrastructure, and with the training and expertise of piloting, particularly in that port and to those berths and those facilities, the pilot is well versed in that role. The masters of ships, the question's always asked, okay, well, why? I use the valet analogy. Why is a car park so valuable that it's valet parking only, which is essentially what the pilot service is? You look at a port like Port Hedland, for example, 5% of Australia's GDP is funneled through iron ore exports. They're routinely moving 1 million tonnes of iron ore per tide. The cost of the channel being blocked is measured in the tens of millions of dollars per tide. So the risk mitigation there is to employ pilots, highly trained, highly skilled ship handlers, particularly that port, to manage the operation of bringing those ships in and out. Could the ship's master do it? Probably, but the employment of the pilot takes the word probably out of the equation. Sydney Harbour speaks for itself. You know, an environmental catastrophe due to a shipping incident in Sydney Harbour would be immeasurable. So hence the employment of marine pilots. So just to give you, JT gave a brief introduction to my career. I did work on the harbour for a brief period, and then I went to pursue a career at sea. At that stage, there was no link between the state-based ticketing system and the federal system. So I had to leave everything behind, go to sea, which is where the traditional career path to pilotage starts. So I went to sea as a deck cadet. Crude oil tankers, as you can see here, this when Australia had crude oil tankers. Bring crude oil from the Persian Gulf, ports in Southeast Asia to Sydney generally, and Geelong on this ship when we were still refined in Sydney. I also worked on refined product carriers like this one, which then smaller than crude oil carriers carry the then refined products around the coast. And by refined products, I mean the unleaded fuel, diesel, jet fuel, avgas, and various chemicals. I worked in a sector then called the offshore oil and gas sector on these type of ships, which they're called anchor handling ships. They're basically very large seagoing tugs. And we would tow semi-submersible oil platforms like this one into their positions for drilling activities and then run their anchors. So this is the bridge of an anchor handling tug facing aft, obviously. So the anchor handling work is all done on the rear deck. There's a navigation section of the bridge forward. Very large gear, very large horsepower. We would be running anchors in anywhere between 600 and 1,100 metres of water. So you're talking 8 anchors or 12 anchors in some instances with 9,000 feet of chain and anchor. So you need a hell of a lot of horsepower to work with that. So just a couple of photos there to show you the size of the gear you're talking about on the rear end of an anchor handler. It's we would have on that vessel somewhere in the order of 180 to 190 tons of bollard pull when you compare to a harbour tug, which has somewhere in the order of 50 or 60 ton bollard pull. So incredibly powerful ships. A lot of ship handling, but different ship handling to large large tankers and things. I also worked on these sort of vessels, which are supply vessels. These would take the cargo out to the drilling platforms, no anchor handling, much less horsepower, much more tank capacity. So we would carry cargoes ranging from drilling equipment to food stores to various liquid cargoes used in the drilling process. And we would also take cargo out to ships like this. This is a pipeline vessel, the Solitaire, which was laying the Wheatstone LNG pipeline, which is now in service over in Western Australia. And if the time lapse I have here works, you see we were carting out the sections of pipe, loading. The Solitaire was plucking these off, welding the sections of pipe together, and then shifting ahead 20 metres at a time as she laid the pipeline on the seabed. So really, really interesting stuff if you're into big boys toys like I am. I did some relief work in Sydney Harbour, working on the bunker barges here, which you probably would all recognise, supplying fuel to mainly the cruise ships. My last couple of years was in command of this vessel, the ICS Silver Lining, a general cargo vessel or multi-purpose vessel working primarily as a bulk carrier between Port Pirie and Tasmanian ports. We would do some phosphate cargoes to the eastern seaboard as well out of Tasmania. So at the time I came through the system, the minimum requirement in Sydney was for 12 months command time. I spent 2 years on the ICS Silver Lining. I also had pilot exemption certificates in Port Pirie and Burnie for this ship, and I also had exemption certificates in Dampier, Port Botany and Sydney. So I had some experience in ship handling, although when I became a pilot I realised how much I didn't know about ship handling, and this was I won't say a prerequisite, but favourable to getting into the pilot. So come through the merchant Navy, spend time in command, preferably with some pilot exemption experience, and that's been the traditional path up to pilotage since time block. And what happens in every port, every state has different requirements. Some ports are private companies, and so everyone has their different requirements. That was the requirements for Sydney, and that's where I find myself today. So when you start as a pilot in Sydney, the pilotage, New South Wales pilotage code for all New South Wales ports, and that is Yamba, Newcastle, Sydney, Botany, Kembla and Eden, has the same training requirements. So a minimum number of observation jobs, I would go out being mentored by another pilot, watching and learning from them for a minimum of 70 jobs. In our ports, because we do both ports, this training would be replicated across both ports. So 70 trips in Botany, 70 trips in Sydney. To attain the first level license, there would also be a number of supervised pilotages where I would take the conduct of the ship and the supervising pilot would then assess me. And then once I'm up to a certain level, then I would be audited by a check pilot. In Sydney, we have 7 license. Sydney and Botany, we have 7 license levels you progress through in the training period. So the first training period usually lasts for about 4 to 5 months. Get your first license. And you can see on the table there, just the license is graded on the type of ship. So container in general, and then the length or the displacement, whichever comes first. Passenger ships based on the length and gross tonnage, and then tankers and bulk carriers based on the length and displacement. The licenses on the left there, 1A, 1B, just simply mean first year license, split by 6 months. So you spend 6 months on a 1A license, doing a minimum number of training jobs for the next license in between while you're piloting ships in that first license range, and then progressing through the system up until level 3, which is basically the sixth level, unlimited on all ships. However, there's 3 jobs we have across the ports which require additional training because of the difficulty, I guess, and the risk of those jobs. The large tankers into Cove are an extra endorsement on top of the level 3 license. And then in Port Botany, which I'll show for those who don't know Port Botany too well, Kurnell, there's 2 berths in Kurnell which require an endorsement. So along with the training on the job, which I'll call it the observations and the supervised pilotage, we also do simulation. Simulation is fantastic in that you can, particularly for initial training, you can do as much or as little of a job as you want. A pilotage, generally most pilotages take about an hour and a half from pilot boarding to berthing. So in a simulation, if you're having issues with a particular turn or a particular section of the pilotage, you can start and finish that where you like and then go back. You don't have to go out on the water with a pilot each time. Some jobs don't happen for a couple of weeks at a time. Tankers into Gore Cove are cyclic. So if you get a chance to do one, it might be a couple of weeks before you get the chance to do another one, whereas you have a simulator and you can replay this over and over again. When you're in your initial training, you also do a number of emergency situations. So that can range from anything from losing propulsion to a rudder lock, the tug having a line foul and then not being able to assist you. We also have weather events. So you might be in the simulator and they dial the wind or the wind up or the visibility down. There's also a requirement in the initial training to do a blind pilotage. So zero visibility, instrument pilotage in and out of both ports. We also use the simulators for ongoing training. So every few years, periodically, we go back to the simulator to do another round of emergency sims. It's also used for proof of concept things, new berths, or maybe we're considering the way we do a job, maybe changing the maneuver. The most recent example I can think of is there's a cruise ship coming to Sydney. It was the Sapphire Princess. It's becoming a P&O ship called the Pacific Adventure. They've actually had to crop the funnel down so it will get under the harbour bridge. It's 285 metres long and we're doing it into White Bay. We haven't done cruise ships of that size into White Bay before. So we've done some simulation work to assess how we're going to do that job. With port expansion as well, the simulation is a part of that, deciding on berths, leading marks and how the manoeuvres will be conducted when those new berths or facilities open. Simulation is good. It is limited. This is some simulations I was involved in last year, just doing some emergency manoeuvres in Port Botany. When we do our emergency manoeuvres, this is looking from the bridge wing of the simulator, and you can see a tug working down there. We actually take a Sydney tug master with us each time. They're obligated to come and do the emergency sims with us. And this is one of our tug masters in the tug simulator, which is downstairs from the main bridge mission simulator, working with us on the job. We're talking on the radio like we would be any other job, directing the tugs as a pilot would do. And he can see our ship and it's all interacting. So they're fantastic for this sort of thing. However, they are limited. So in addition to the simulation, the pilots in initial training will also do some human factors and error management training. Probably the most interesting and the one most people find fascinating is the manned models. So what you're looking at here is a facility up near Raymond Terrace called Port Ash. 1 to 25th scale size model ships with 1 to 25th scale tugs, deep water, shallow water to scale, canals, channels. You can do single buoy mooring stuff. The tugs there are 1 to 25th scale as well. What this equates to is a 1 to 5 time and motion scale. So when you're moving these models around the facility, it's happening 5 times quicker in the real world. But the beauty of it is the hydrodynamic effects of the ship in the water are exactly the same as what you would experience in the real world. So if you can adjust the time scale, what you're experiencing is what you would in the real world. Fantastic, because you do a lot of theory in the classroom about certain hydrodynamic effects of ships. Practicing in the real world, you really don't want to do that on a large ship. Here you can feel it and see it happening, and then it's videoed. You can replay it. We go into a classroom afterwards, and if you happen to run the model aground, you stand up, you put the boat hook in the water, push yourself off the bank, and try again. It's fabulous. So here you can see one of the models in action. The gentleman on the back's controlling that tug down the stern. There's another gentleman up forward, excuse me, controlling the forward tug. They have Newcastle tug masters, legitimate tug masters, come to the facility and drive the tugs for you, so you're getting the real deal. You'll notice here, if you can see my cursor, some wharfage here, wharfs here, and then up around the bend, a shallow water canal sort of set up there. What we can do up there, for example, here you can see the canal and ships passing. It's important to practice this stuff. I'll show you why. Here's inside the model. So what you're looking at here is the control system for the models. Now, when I say it's a 1 to 5 scale for time and motion, a 5-knot wind across the lake equals equivalent of a 25-knot wind on the model to scale. There is an anemometer there, relative wind direction, so 9 knots, and that's relative to the ship model. So when you do have a wind on the lake there, you're actually feeling it to the scale of what a ship would feel in the real world. So it can be frightening. There's a outline of a chart of the Portash facility. So areas of deep water here, areas of shallow water. I'll explain why they're important in a second. There's you can see the transit lines of just tracing there with my cursor. Why are they there? Okay, so you'll see, I apologise, the orientation for the chart is different from the orientation of the drone view there. You'll see the model, the ship model here, proceeding into an area of deep water. I'm sure that can be seen there, and you'll see the area, the rest of it's a shallow water area. What's deep water? What's shallow water? It's in relation to the draft of the vessel, obviously. Why is that important? Well, here's some strange things happen when ships go into shallow water. Here's a bit of a crude picture of a deep laden tanker in a channel. So let's, for argument's sake, that's displacing about 120, 130,000 tonnes of water. That water's got to go somewhere. In a deep ocean, there's plenty of room for that displaced water to move about. When you hit shallow water and that movement of that water you're displacing is restricted, some strange things happen. We actually plot this in Portash. We actually do this experiment. So what I'm showing you here is the 2 turning circles of exactly the same model with exactly the same power setting and the exact same amount of helm put, but in shallow water and deep water. In relatively shallow water, the turning circle's over double the size that it is in deep water. The manoeuvrability characteristics of a ship change dramatically in shallow water. Other than that turning circle effect there, you also have this effect of ship squat, which you may have heard of. So in shallow water, with that displaced water being squeezed for room, as it goes under the ship, the velocity of that water increases, the pressure decreases, and the ship actually gets drawn to the bottom. The draft increases, and in circumstances that can result in touching the bottom. So it also affects the manoeuvrability of the ship. You find the steering becomes sluggish, speed is affected. The only way to reduce the squats to reduce the speed of the ship, but in some cases then that compromises your ability to control the ship. Portash, fantastic. You can simulate this, you can show its effects, whereas if you're trying to demonstrate that in the real world, you don't really have the facility to push a big ship around and do these maneuvers, and it's much handier than just learning about it in the classroom. So it can actually load the models up to in different load conditions. So as you can see here, P, the centre of area of the above water section exposed to the wind, and R there, the centre of pressure of the underwater section of the ship exposed to the current. And then in different load conditions, obviously these move. So the response of the ship to tide and wind effects changes. You can simulate that at Portage. So what they call the blockage effect or the piston effect, when a ship moves into a canal, example here, ship moving into a canal lock, where does the water go? Sometimes it just stops the ship. We have the example I can best describe in Sydney Harbour is large tankers up to Gore Cove. On the final approach to the berth going into the cove there, if your speed isn't down, when you're displacing that on the large loader ones, 120,000 tonne, it's got to go up into the cove and then it's got to escape the cove. And if you push it up there too quickly, it tries to escape too quickly and can make the ship do some funny things. Ships passing close to one another in a confined channel. So when you displace that water, as I've just said, the ship pushing all that water ahead of it, you get a couple of things happen there. You get a high pressure area at the front of the ship and consequently a low pressure area at the back of the ship. So in those confined canal arrangements there, as I showed you, you get an effect, funnily enough, called bank effect, where the high pressure wave at the front of the ship interacts with the bank and your bow shears away from the bank, and then consequently your stern is drawn towards the bank. Pilots in the Suez Canal, and I have not seen this, but I've been told pilots in the Suez Canal use this to great effect on some turns. The other risk with those pressure areas is interaction with other ships. So the two ships passing, if they're close enough, and incidentally the tugs have this interaction effect with the ships where they get drawn into low pressure areas on the ship, but two high pressure areas at the front of two ships approaching each other will cause them to repel. We simulated in Portage, often with spectacular groundings. Overtaking ships, a similar effect with the high pressure area at the front of a ship hitting the stern of another and pushing it away. Just before I start this, I've got a small animation here, but this is a clip from the video I showed you. So interaction also occurs with this ship here passing one moored. The animation I'm about to show you, or the video clip, goes for a few seconds, but just concentrate on two things. The ship at the berth as this one passes, and then the effect of these ships as they pass each other. So just watch the ship at the berth here, and you'll see it getting drawn away from the berth. I might just replay that if I can do that without any trouble. You see this one moving about on the berth there, and then look at the interaction between these ships as they approach each other. They haven't touched each other. This one's just pushed this one out of the way. The stern of this one's being drawn to the bank because of that low pressure area. In Port Botany, we have the issue of large ships passing each other in the dock because you have to have sufficient speed down. The ships interact and can actually lift the ship on the berth off the dock and part lines. Touchwood, I haven't seen it my time there, but when I was on ships in the Brisbane River, when we were doing cargo on tankers, as other ships passed in the river, we would have to stop cargo because as they passed, the interaction would be such that even at low speeds, we would be at risk. The ship would surge up and down the dock, we'd be at risk of parting lines and tearing the ship off the berth. The magic pivot point, which is a crucial thing to know in large ship handling. You'll see at the top here, P in the center of the ship. So a ship stopped in the water simply pivots around that point in the center of the ship. As soon as the ship gets headway, that pivot point moves, as you can see here where I'm circling. Why is that important? You get more leverage then, obviously, with your propeller and rudder at the stern with a ship with headway, and consequently a ship moving astern, and it only has to be ever so slightly astern, the pivot point comes aft, meaning your bow thrusters have far more effect because that lever is much larger over that distance. So here's an example, 2 tugs lifting a ship from bow and stern, applying an even amount of force. Because that ship's moving astern, the pivot point comes aft, that lever is much stronger at the bow. And we use the pivot point to great effect. Often a ship, sometimes you do a departure, say in Port Botany, and you may only have 1 tug. The winds come up a bit. Tug on the stern, obviously, because that's where the most wind effect is going to be on the accommodation. So if you give that ship just a slight amount of stern weight, all of a sudden your bow thruster becomes noticeably more effective, just simply because with that little bit of a stern movement, the pivot point comes aft. That's the physics of it, I guess, and all demonstrable at Port Ash. You can see here where we've got the tugs pushing, all affected by where the pivot point is and what effect that's going to have on the ship. Well, they also have a cruise ship model up there. Now, this might be familiar to some of you, the hull shape. This is actually the hull shape of one of the LHDs that the Navy has. This model cost them almost $500,000 to build, and it has a couple of different setups. So the Navy go to Port Ash and use it as an LHD model, and then in this instance, the top's removed, a different block's put on, and it's used as a cruise ship model. And that's important because not all ships are single screw, rudder, bow thruster arrangements. We have azipods, which are now pretty common in the cruise ship world. In fact, most of the cruise ships we do have azipods, and up to 4 large bow thrusters, which we can simulate using that model. So Port Ash is a fantastic world-class facility, and you're able to do so many things you can't do in the world of simulation. There's a number of these around the world, Warsash, Port Revel, etc. Port Ash is right up there, and it's close, so we use that facility. We also come back here every few years to rehash our skills at Port Ash, and then the facility is there, of course, to go up any other time and try some things we might like to do. The instructors up there's a couple of ex-Sydney pilots up there. They're all ex-pilots, experts in the field of ship handling, and I can't wax lyrical enough about the place. I quite enjoy it up there. So we pilot in Port Botany and Sydney, as I mentioned. This is Port Botany for those that may not be familiar with it. There's 12 berths along the key line of Hayes Dock and Brotherson Dock. We only use 9 of them at the moment. Container ships up to 335 metres at the moment. We're shortly, I believe, going to be simulating larger ships. It's quite common now to have many of these size ships a week. Just in my brief time with the pilots, watching the size of the container ships increase has just been phenomenal. But sometimes 2 of these 335 by 45 metre ships a day. There's 2 bulk liquids berth there, so they do anything from these small, that's an 86 metre LPG carrier. We do asphalt carriers, products carriers, large 250 odd metre product carrying ships as well. And then Kernel on the southern side there. So there's two jetty berths there. That's recently been extended to now accept these larger size vessels. And then what I've got circled there is a conventional buoyed mooring system. So this is a ship at Kernel number 3, it's called. And you'll see her anchor is deployed there. So they now deploy one anchor, lay back into a buoy system, and the ship is tied up to a set of buoys similar to something like this, and a hose is picked up off the seabed and the ship discharges it ashore by that. When I said before that there's some jobs that require an extra endorsement, Kernel 3, this berth is one of them. It's the manoeuvre itself isn't challenging. The tie-up is a specialist manoeuvre. Sydney Harbour, of course. Yes, sorry, Jason.
Sorry. Yeah, look, I was just, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to mention to those people that are tuned in watching, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions about Luke's presentation later in the towards the end. I know there's a couple of questions that are coming through now, but if it could be, if you just go to the chat box at the bottom of the screen there, type in your questions, and then either myself or James will look at the questions and then put them to Luke towards the end of the presentation, which at this stage we're aiming sort of around 7:30 to give you some idea. We don't want to cut him short because it's so interesting. Sorry, Luke, go ahead.
No problem, JT. So, okay, Sydney Harbour, this is everyone in this presentation's backyard. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but here we go anyway. Sydney Cove Passenger Terminal, large cruise ships. Gore Cove, number 1, tankers up to 263 metres long. Now there's no crude oil tankers, so it's all, they still bring the large tankers in, but it's all refined products stored at the tank farm there and pushed up the pipeline to the tank farm at Clyde. White Bay, so variety of ships there, cruise ships at White Bay 5, small tankers and other heavy lift operations, and sometimes just lay-up berths from White Bay 3 to 4. Glebe 7 and Glebe 8, so gypsum carriers and sugar carriers to Glebe 7, cement carriers to Glebe 8, and construction's just begun on the multi-user facility at Glebe 1 and 2, which were the old car carrying berths many years ago, and that's going to be for the import of bulk sand and aggregate as Sydney's running out of sand for construction. So in Sydney currently there's 20 licensed there's 23 pilots, 20 unlimited licensed pilots, and there's 3 limited licensed pilots, meaning people still training through the system. So at some of those early license levels and piloting some of the smaller ships around. We pilot between both ports approximately 4,500 commercial ship movements a year. Now that dances between 4,200, 4,700, and is up and down every year. Sydney accounts for about 20% of those, largely cruise ships. The average size of the ship in gross tonnage terms has increased in excess of 40% over the past 10 years. So with the cruise ship events of earlier this year, we did a phenomenal amount of cruise ship movements. In March and April, there were 2 separate days where we handled over 1.5 million gross tonnes of ship in both ports. 4th of April, movements totaling 1.2 million total gross tonnes was exceeded in Sydney, and it was only 10 ship movements. So 9 of these passenger ship movements ranging from 90,000 to 169,000 gross tonnes, which is phenomenal. The average gross registered tonnage in Sydney was 122,000. So to give you an example, we're just starting to clip the average gross tonnage of ships now, 50,000, which is steadily increased over the last 8 years. I believe this year we're going to tip 50,000 gross tonnes as the average. So for that period, for those days to average 122,000 gross tonnes was quite a staggering figure. So the average day for a Sydney botany pilot, the old pilot station at Watson's Bay doesn't exist anymore as a pilot station because most of the shipping is out of botany. In Sydney, Moores Wharf here next to number 9 Walsh Bay or the old Darling Harbour 3 is where we are stationed if we're doing work out of Sydney. In botany, this building here, Brotherson House, which is at the end of Brotherson Dock. So I'd be allocated my ships for the day, turn up at the station half an hour before proceed time out to the ship. I garner my information off this transmit sheet for the ship. So I'm piloting this day the OOCL Beijing large container ship. So what do I want to know while I'm planning my pilotage? So a few things: gross tonnes, length overall, beam of the ship up there as I've highlighted. Tides, importantly. Okay, obviously I want to know what the tide's doing and when it's doing it, and the changes. So for a couple of reasons, I want to know what the current's doing at points where that affects the movement of the ship. Also importantly, I want to know the rise and fall of the tide, because now we're doing tide critical movements in particularly Port Botany, very large ships with large drafts coming in. where I'm going to, which berth is important, which side to I'm putting it. Touch wood, I haven't brought a ship in yet and gone to put it on the wrong side, which is a mistake everyone's made once, from what I'm told. Bridge marks, bow marks. So I've got some pictures to highlight that. We're bringing large ships into tight spaces now. How do you put a ship along a quay line and get the space right? No, you're not going to hit the ship ahead or astern of you. So you'll see bridge board there, 154. The whole quay line is painted with numbers 10 metres apart. I need to put the ship's bridge on the mark 154. If I know the bow to bridge distance, I know where the bow is going to sit, and the bow to stern distance, consequently, I know where the stern is going to sit, and I should be able to, just by the maths, clear the vessel ahead or astern. Tugs, how many tugs I'm using, that just, if I'm using one tug or 4 tugs, where am I going to put them? In this case, I've got 4 tugs booked. What class of tug are they? Z tug just indicates I know they're in a certain range of power and capability. Type of lines, synthetic. Why is that important? Well, ships with wires take a hell of a lot longer to tie up than ships with synthetic lines. So that can add easily another hour to your job, which might be critical to knowing if you're going to make the next one or not. And then down here, windage area, 9,937 metres. So the windage area now, we're getting this sent to us from the large container ships, so that based on the predicted wind, we can do a calculation to determine the force that could apply on the beam of the ship, and then what towage requirements we may need should the wind reach a certain level. Air draft, simply how much of the ship is out of the water. It says there 52.2 metres. So that's important if you're in Sydney, obviously for the bridge clearance for the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And in botany, we have a restriction on something called the OLS, the Obstacle Limitation Surface from the airport, which within certain berths, we can't bring ships in because they interfere with operations at the airport. And then in some cases, we've recently had rules imposed upon us with container ships of certain size, with winds from certain angles will cause wind shear issues for for aircraft landing on the 3rd runway, so we have to return them to sea. So this is Hayes Dock in botany. This, you can see how close together we're putting these ships. At Brotherson Dock again, the lines from each other crossing over like spaghetti. So that's a 20 metre clearance there, or just about. When you've got, this is looking over the stern of a small ship, so there's very short distance to the stern of my ship here, so I'm able to see the stern of the ship and I'm able to judge my clearance pretty well. But on a larger container ship, as you can see here, where this is coming alongside, where does your ship end and where does the other one start? And it's very hard to judge that, hence why the bridge mark and knowing your distances is so crucial. This is another example looking from the offside of a ship, looking down the stern to the end of the dock. It's hard to see where that is. And then also looking ahead from the bridge of a ship, there may be 40 or 50 metres clearance to the end of the dock there, but as you can see from the bridge of the ship, that's nigh on impossible to determine. So looking over the side of the ship here, you can see the bridge mark graduations there. I'm on or about bridge mark 154. I make a habit of, when I'm driving to the berth, of parking my car as close to the bridge mark as I can, so I can see it as I'm approaching. And then the linesman actually place a small a cone with a light on it there blinking, so as you're approaching the berth from a distance, you can determine your bridge mark. Getting tankers alongside is a bit different. We don't have bridge marks. We have the loading arms there, which have to line up to a specific manifold on the ship. So you may have a tolerance of a metre or metre and a half either way. In Kurnell, we do the Caltex shuffle. In Sydney, we do the Shell shuffle. So as you're coming alongside, the terminal operator will be saying metre ahead, oh no, you've overshot it, metre astern, come 2 metres astern, 3 metres astern. So you shuffle back and forwards to line up with the manifolds, because they do have a little bit of leeway in their movement, but not much. This is glebe number 7, a ship called the Pioneer, bridge mark 230. What you can see here is little bit of yellow paint on the timber on the wharf, a little bit of yellow paint on the ship. This ship discharges via a hopper chute that basically connects like a small hose. So as you're putting this ship alongside, they are literally saying 5 cm, 4 cm, 3 cm, 2 cm, lining it up to the centimetre with the hopper. I've just highlighted it there. Okay, so I've digressed a little bit there. So I've garnered that information off the transmit sheet about the ship. Then I'm going to look at my wave, wind and tide page. What am I looking at here? Well, the swell off the port, offshore directional, always interest to me because where's the swell coming from? So I have an idea of the wind and swell, where they're going to rig their ladder on the way out. What's the most suitable side? How big is the swell? Is it going to be a challenging boarding? And at different, you can see here, these are just wind sensors in different parts: airport runway, the Caltex wharf, Caltex current. The bombora is important. What's at the bombora off Bear Island? Because some of these ships, as you actually enter the port, they roll more inside the port, and that's the shallowest part of our transit, that you run the risk of touching the bottom. Checking the tides here. This graph, which I'll be checking, shows me the difference between the predicted and the measured tide. So subtle changes due to the atmospheric pressure or prevailing wind, or we don't so much get affected by stormwater and things like that, but that can change. That can create a difference between the predicted and the measured tide. And then this is a new feature where I've just basically looking at wind. This page shows me whether I have a berthing window to get over a transit window, I should say, to get over the shallow part of the transit off the bombora there in Port Botany. Because as I say, we're now bringing ships in 14.1 metre draft over a shallow patch of rock, 15.6 metres, where sometimes a 2 or 3 metre swell can run through, so dramatically reduces your under keel clearance. So once I've garnered that all that information, I then have a passage plan that looks something like this. There's one for Sydney, one for Botany. We're actually starting to push these out to the ship electronically, so they have some preparation before they get to the port. I will fill this out with various information, expected traffic, what lines I'm going to run first and last, the information off the transmit sheet I just showed you. Proceed out to the ship in the pilot cutter there, climb up aboard, and then commence what's called the master pilot exchange. So present myself to the master. I'll discuss my passage plan with him. He'll present me something called a pilot card. Now, there's no standard for a pilot card, but what a pilot card is the current and manoeuvring information of the ship. So you can see this is a passenger ship one, which is very well presented, very complex. You also have a wheelhouse poster, which is a requirement on all ships, which shows manoeuvring characteristics, responses in emergency manoeuvres, standard turning circles, crash stop distances, that sort of thing. We don't really spend a lot of time relying on that. We garner information off it sometimes when we're assessing the thrusters on a ship. This is a more common pilot card, which I would be presented on a ship. So this is on a container ship called the MSC Sydney, and I'll just take you through what I'm looking at as a pilot when the master presents this to me. So the draft forward and aft, 10.7 metres of ship under the water forward, 11.05 aft. Then I can do my tidal calculations. We get this presented to us for ships arriving, but on departure you only get it once you get on board the ship. So then you do your tidal calculations. The air draft, how much of the ship's above the water, as I mentioned before. Some ship's particulars, so the length and breadth of the ship, 336 by 45. Anchor chain, how much anchor chain's in each locker. So won't be looking at that really too much, but it's handy to know I've got 14 shackles of anchor on either side should I require to deploy it in emergency. Here we have the bow to bridge and bow to stern distance. So there's 261 metres almost forward of the bridge and nearly 76 metres after the bridge. So that's important for working out my clearing distances. And then when you walk out on the wing of the ship, every ship has this little plaque on the side, right on the bridge wing there. So the length overall, 336 metres, and this is just confirming what I saw on the pilot card. 261 metres clearance ahead, nearly 76, sorry, clearance, 261 metres of ship ahead, 76 metres or thereabouts ship astern. The steering particulars, what kind of rudder has the ship got? So semi-balanced spade rudder, clearly the most common type of rudder. How many degrees port to starboard it goes and how many seconds it takes to get there, that's important. Some ships have high lift rudders, Becker rudders, where they have an extra flap and they're far more responsive. Shilling rudders is various types, but most commonly on these large ships, the semi-balanced spade rudder. Bow thruster, how effective or how powerful is it? 3,000 kilowatts, which is handy to know. And then the manoeuvring table here for the main engine. So this is telling me the main engine, the continuous rating, 58,707 horsepower. This shows dead slow ahead, the main engine gives me a minimum speed of 9.7 knots. So when I discussed before passing ships at a minimum speed in a dock so you don't tear them off the berth, this ship has a minimum speed. Now, bear in mind, it will take a little while to get up to 9.7, but when you've got a minimum speed of 9.7, it can be problematic. That's the minimum speed the engine can run at down here. Sorry. So if you see under here, minimum RPM, 27 RPM, the engine turns over at 27 revolutions per minute and still produces 7 knots. Such is the efficiency of the engine and propeller and the size of it. There's another thing, another box I've highlighted here, maximum number of consecutive starts, 9. And I'll point out what that means in just a second, if you can just remember that. So this is a departure from the corner of Brotherson Dock, and I have to pass these ships here. If I've got the maximum speed where to operate in the dock is 3 knots. If the minimum speed the ship can give me is 9.7, and bear in mind it will take a while to get up to that, it is a problem. So these ships are that ship's 336 metres long with a minimum speed of 9.7 knots. It's a greyhound, so it can be problematic. So that's the sort of typical size of a main engine out of a container ship. And where I mentioned before, 9 consecutive starts, there isn't an electric motor or a battery big enough to turn that engine over and start it. What happens with these large container ship engines is they're slow revving and they start in one direction. They're direct drive to the propeller. So that engine, when I put the telegraph dead slow ahead, will start. There's no neutral. The engine is simply stop. It starts dead slow ahead. And then if I want to go astern, I have to stop the engine. When I go astern, the cam gear in the main engine changes and the engine itself starts in the other direction. And if I am not economical with my movements, I can run out of air to maneuver the ship. So 9 consecutive starts means there's enough air in those bottles to start the engine 9 consecutive times. Now there's compressors on board continuously topping that air up, but if you're a bit hot-handed with your manoeuvring, then you do run the risk of running out of air. The other issue with these, you can see here off the pilot card, 5-blade fixed pitch propeller, 9-metre diameter, right-handed. So those of us that drive little small single screw pleasure boats around the place know that when you go astern, the propeller has a paddle wheel effect, and in most cases, most propellers turn right-handed when going ahead, and when you go astern in your boat, the paddle wheel effect winds the stern of your vessel to the left. Well, with a propeller of this size, it still happens, and it happens in a big way. So knowing the direction of the propeller turning is crucial. The paddle wheel effect, or cut as we refer to it, is just as dynamic on a large ship. The other thing we garner off that, the pilot card, is the rating of the bits and leads where we're going to put the tugs line. I mentioned before the tugs are around 50, 60 tonnes bollard pull. So static, they can lift 50 to 60 tonnes depending on the tug. Dynamically, when the ship's moving ahead and you lift back on that line, that can increase. So you need to know the ratings of the gear you're working with so that you don't overload it and do something like this. Once you've done all that, you then pilot the ship in, hopefully without incident. So I may have made that sound like it was quite a long process, but all that information garnering and sharing happens within the space of about 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Then I'll call VTS. So if I've only boarded 4 miles out, I've usually got the conduct of the ship handed over to me by about 2 miles. And then at that stage, I'll be giving helm orders, engine orders, courses to steer to the helmsman, communicating with vessel traffic services, communicating with the tugs, and then eventually communicating with the terminal and getting her alongside. Here we are at Gore Cove. So Sydney Harbour, what's unique? What's particular about piloting in Sydney Harbour? The boarding arrangements, as mentioned, we use ladders in Sydney. So there's a few different iterations of that. This is what's called a combination ladder, and I hope this video is running smoothly. So if the vessel's freeboard is over 9 metres, the ladder's insufficient. You have to have this set up where a accommodation ladder comes down part of the way down the ladder, and then the pilot goes up and can transfer across that. So they're never climbing more than 9 metres straight. This is what's called a trapdoor arrangement. These are out of favour at the moment. A pilot in the US was killed with one of these recently. So that you see that my apologies. I'll just try and run that video again. So the pilot here disembarking, coming through the trapdoor in the accommodation ladder, and down off the ladder and onto the pilot cutter. They're quite common on container ships. Cruise ships have the gun port or the shell door, the hole in the side of the ship. So never as much of a climb, but they have their own issues that you can't really do much in a lot of large swell if there's no good lead, as the boat will ride simply over the gun port. And this is a cruise ship again, whereas sometimes the conditions are such that you just don't even bother with the ladder because the boat's riding up and down so much that if the ladder was to pile up on the deck and then you landed on it, you can get tangled up on it. So it's less risk to have the ladder not there at all, and then just have the fella on the cutter catch it. So I'll let this run. This runs for a minute or so. This is John Biff, and if he's watching, probably familiar with this video. This is one of my colleagues who's still piloting now. This is on one of the old pilot vessels, so it's a few years ago. Boarding a tanker off Sydney in some significant swell. So the climb here is over 9 metres, but the pilots decided because the conditions are so bad, let's dispense with the combination ladder and just go a straight ladder because it's less dangerous to board. So this is the conditions we face at time to time off Sydney and Botany. Very large swell, which we've just had in recent weeks with the East Coast low. We got to a point where the port was closed for a couple of days. Boarding in these conditions is a challenge, as you can see here, but it's sometimes necessary. So despite the ship trying its best to give us a lee, the ship is then beam onto the swell and rolling, and the pilot cutter's moving about. It's just a matter of timing the rise and fall so you get to the top of the climb. Here, as you can see, he manages to get on the ladder as the boat drops away. Very, very slick. The swell causes other issues. As you enter the harbour, particularly the turn into the West Channel, the swell can catch your quarter, and the ships try to round up continuously to port in the swell. It's not unusual in the conditions like that, where you have the ship's speed back as you enter the heads, and then you turn to port, but with the swell on the quarter trying to round you up and turn you back to sea, your next order's hard to starboard full ahead just to square you up into the West Channel. Obviously with Sydney, here's a time lapse. Traffic management is a is an issue. Coming from the world of Sydney ferries, I used to see all sorts of traffic situations, so I don't get too much of a hothead in traffic, but it's definitely a challenge and one that's unique to piloting in Sydney. During the rehearsal last night, JT self-identified as someone who crossed my path on this transit. It's a small cement carrier into Glebe 8. Sightseeing, not unusual, coming down the harbour, piloting a ship, captain, chief officer, everyone's standing out on the wing taking photos of the Opera House. The helmsman and me left to our own devices. There's even a GoPro on the window there. Visibility, low visibility. I took this photo. I was actually being checked on a cruise ship going into White Bay. We had no idea it was going to be this thick, otherwise we wouldn't have got in, but past Bradley's Head. Just got to that point, it closed in and had to continue in. That's one of the issues we face in the wintertime. The sheer variety of jobs we get. So in Sydney Harbour, I've piloted 34-metre tug, as you can see here. I've dead ship towed a submarine back to the Maritime Museum. Done a 35-metre Japanese fishing boat where no one spoke English on board, and I had to use Google Translator to discuss the pilotage with them. Piloted the Steve Irwin into Circular Quay. Super yachts. This was one of the more fascinating jobs where I, despite being as clean as I could be, I was still fashioned with booties when I came on board, so I didn't carry grease all over their deck. And 1 minute you can be doing that, and then the next minute you can be piloting the Spectrum of the Seas, the largest cruise ship we've done in and out of Sydney to date. So it's fascinating, the variety we get between ships. Cruise ships are a very different style of pilotage. There's a lot of people on the bridge that their training is very company specific. In particular, piloting a Carnival ship is very different to piloting a Royal Caribbean ship, for instance. This is a Majestic Princess in and out of the quay. The final manoeuvre is always generally done by one of the bridge team, and that can be from the security officer to the master. They're very good at passing it around and the training their vessel handling amongst the bridge team. Challenge with cruise ships, obviously, the sail area of the Ovation of the Seas, Spectrum of the Seas, 14,614 square metres. I don't know what the sail area of common racing yacht is, but I dare say it's a wee bit smaller than that. You can see on this graphic here the Harbour Tunnel. So one of the issues with cruise ships, you've got Sydney Harbour Bridge clearance is not an issue with the larger cruise ships because we don't go under it, but just being conscious of the Sydney Harbour Tunnel. There's a grounding risk at that part of the tunnel, so coming wide into Circular Quay, at certain tides, there is a risk of actually grounding and sitting on top of the tunnel, which is highly undesirable. And one of the joys of cruise ships, if you're like me, is you can stop at the casino on the way back down to the pilot boat. Into Glebe 7, tight spaces down here. So all these charter vessels you can see along the quay line down here make it difficult to get ships in and out of there. They're always good fun. Ships with limited visibility. And then down in Glebe, as I say, you've got ships with limited space there. The tugs can't even square up. We do ships into the dry dock. This is the Spirit of Tasmania going into the dry dock at Garden Island. And then some of these special event style jobs. So this was bringing a ship into her first visit into Sydney Harbour, and they put some pyrotechnics on the water at 4 a.m. and pretended it was coming down a runway. It was quite spectacular. Large tankers into Gore Cove. So these are sort of the highlight job, I guess. The challenge with those is here, the Ball's Head current roars through there and can be quite challenging. On those larger ones, we have a limit. If the Ball's Head current is more than half a knot, we don't do the job. This is a graphic taken from my navigational equipment, just to highlight the Ball's Head current there. So I hope this is running. Look, it's a bit clunky on my screen, but the green avatar there is the outline of a ship. The grey sections ahead of that are a predictor at 1 minute intervals. I've got this sped up 10 times. But what happens is, as you can see, making the final turn there around Bull's Head, is that once you get to this point, you're exposing that whole side of the ship to the Bull's Head current and a flood tide. You can imagine that clipping your stern and driving your head around or pushing you up the river, and vice versa with an ebb tide. So large tanker going into Gore Cove, it's shot from a drone. You might be able to see here the tug forward laying back on its line. There's quite a bit of weight there, quite a bit of weight on the stern. The vessel's probably still going ahead. Still going ahead on her main engine? Why is that? Well, to maintain steerage, you need water flow past the rudder. Best way to do that is to run the engine ahead. The trade-off with that is that you gain ship speed, which may not be desirable. So the tugs can be laying back as a brake while you're working against them, using the ship's engine ahead to keep that water flow over the rudder and maintain steerage. And this just goes to show, you can see the tug pushing down on the quarter here, the other one lifting the stern around. This is in an ebb tide, working against it, but the power used to get these vessels around the corner. So I'll just take you back to Port Botany for the final part of this, and I'm sorry if I'm going over time, JT. We're not far from closing.
No, I think everybody's enjoying themselves and picking up some brand new knowledge. It's pretty impressive, actually. Look, keep going.
Okay, so in Port Botany, I'm just highlighting here leads. So leads and marks we use. So this is a large container ship going into Port Botany. You can see I've just highlighted ahead. You've got a white light over it, a yellow or orange light there in transit. These lights are actually on the runways at the airport. When those lights are in transit, that's our entrance lead. Come in on a course of 312. Pretty clear. Botany's got a number of leads, very useful ones. This is in the dock. So backing down the dock, this is looking astern on a large container ship, and I'm backing down the dock and I'm going to put this ship into that corner there. And if I can just magnify what you see down here, there's two sets of leads, and they're basically red squares. When these are in transit, they indicate 100 metres off the key line here, and vice versa, the other ones on the other side indicate 100 metres clearance off the other side. That's important because if I'm lined up with those and I know the beam of this ship is 32 metres, well, I can work out my clearance as I pass down that ship. Sydney has leads. You'll be familiar with the Grotto Point lead here. We're not as blessed with as many leading marks, official leading marks, as other ports around the place. So the Grotto Point lead there lines up with the rear lead in up in the near upper suburbs of Mossman there, Balmoral. I'll come back to that, but we'll call those the Sydney Harbour entrance leads. You might be familiar with Goat Island here. We call these the deep tanker leads. Those are lit when we're bringing a large tanker in. And the southern limit leads, the two diamonds here. So just looking on the chart, obviously the main leads there delineate the deep water coming in on a tanker, and the dotted line shows what the limit leads clear you from that 15-metre contour line. You may not have noticed this, but it exists, and it's a relatively new addition, is the red light on the bridge carriageway. And when that lines up with the red beacon off Campbell's Cove there, that's a leading line to carry us north of Fort Denison inbound. So that's official leads. We don't have that many, and this is why I'd be fascinated to get out with John Biffin at some stage, see some of his. We have many unofficial leads and marks. And one of the fascinating things for me coming from a small boat career and working on ferries was when I started coming on ships in and out of Sydney, was seeing how pilots saw the harbour and the things they were looking for. So there's various buildings and landmarks and trees and other things which assist us in getting around the harbour. And first one I'll show here is just an example. This is some examples. There are many of these. Some of these we all use. Some are personal to pilots. And I'm sure, as I mentioned, John Biffin would be able to enrich me with many, many more. Awalba Street, Balmoral, you can see quite clearly coming from sea. There, you line it up with that corner of middle head, makes a fabulous leading transit to come in, course 275. And incidentally, at night, you can see the streetlights of Warburg Street quite clearly. Entering Sydney, right, you can see little sliver of Chinaman's Beach there. That is what we're looking for. Have a look at the separation between Grotto Point and the rear lead. We don't use them as leads to come in on transit. They actually delineate the traffic separation between inbound and outbound traffic. So the entrance leads are a traffic separation, and it's not exactly what we're looking for when we come in. Here's a quite clear one coming into the harbour. Centre Point Tower, the West Channel wedding cake. When I'm coming in on a cruise ship, if I've got my speed set, that's my wheel over mark. I give the helm order to bring the ship round on a constant radius turn. And if my ship speed matches my rate of turn, she'll just land perfectly in the West Channel. Entering the West Channel here, what are we looking for here? Okay, Centre Point Tower and the green lighted obelisk. When they're in transit, if I can just paint this on the chart for you, there's the two there. Draw a line through them, and they put you smack bang between the Sea Boy and the green off middle head entering the channel. If you get a little bit lost in your turn, they're a fantastic transit to come in on. Rounding Bradley's Head, I'll just highlight it here so you can see it a bit better. You've got the diamond on the centre of the bridge roadway, and then the fixed green off Kirribilli Point. Draw them on the chart. When they're in transit, they clear you from the 10-metre contour around Bradley's Head. So you know you're in safe water when you're on a large ship. Just backed out of Gore Cove, swung the ship, trying to get a mark to come around the point on. Water tower in the eastern suburbs, in transit with the light tower on Blues Point. Again, I draw this on the chart and I'll magnify this so you can see it. It puts you through a good area of safe water there, and because you're so affected by tide going through there, it's a good mark to judge the effect of the tide as you go through there and you come around the corner. The Harbour Bridge, believe it or not, we count the stringers on the bridge to determine where the deep water is. And then another example, large, these bulk carriers, self-discharging bulk carriers out of Gleaves. I've just come around Millers Point, trying to find a suitable mark to set myself up on. Again, the water tower in the eastern suburbs, in transit with the tower on Fort Denison. Put it there on the chart for you. And you'll see it puts me in pretty good water, smack bang on the right side of the channel, just south of the centre of the bridge. And finally, if anyone knows who owns this tree and whose backyard it is in the eastern suburbs, we probably owe them a navigation levy, because when it's in transit with the Shark Island wedding cake, fabulous, fabulous transit to come south of Fort Denison outbound on. And incidentally, you can see the silhouette of that at night. So just before I finish, what of the future for pilotage? This is where we're going. Autonomous, no, where we're going out of fashion, but autonomous ships, the buzzword at the moment, or semi-autonomous ships. A lot of companies are putting in a lot of work on this. Where's it going to leave pilotage in 20 years? We don't really know. Autonomous tugs are actually being trialled in some format overseas. They will probably be in fashion before the autonomous ships. Remote pilotage, where this is where the semi-autonomous ships, and this is the tug, the autonomous tugs being, semi-autonomous tugs being driven from ashore, and autonomous shipping, where when the ship reaches port, it will be remotely piloted by someone in a VTS room as such. So no hands-on ship handling anymore. At the moment, where are the pilots going to come from for the future? The problem is, without being political, we don't have a merchant fleet in Australia. So people that came through my traditional path through are becoming less and less. there aren't too many locally trained Australian exempt masters to pick up jobs, and there aren't too many opportunities for young people to get to sea. I'll leave my contact details after this slide for everyone to, and please feel free to get in contact with me anytime, anyone that's got any questions about any of this. But Port Authority of New South Wales runs a cadet scheme where we're sponsoring young people to get away to sea with a view to getting their tickets and hopefully one day being pilots. What we do is we pay for their we pay for them to get their sea time, and then they're set free to go out in the world of shipping and find a company. And we've sponsored 3 cadets so far. We're about to put on a 4th. If anyone knows any young person that's keen and maybe interested in pursuing a career at sea, then please take my details and get in touch with me at the end. So JT, that's it from me, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you everyone for indulging me.
Oh, look, that was fantastic. It was I was just glued to the screen, and I was just loved the complete coverage that you tried to convey in such a short period of time. So much information. It was great. If you've got time for a few questions,
absolutely.
They're building up. James, are you okay to just do the questions?
Oh, sure. We've got a few questions.
Yes.
The first question is, I heard about bow thrusted streams from a ship underway causing a bow to move towards the discharge stream. Does that ever actually happen in real life?
I'm not sure if I understand the question totally, but let me just, if this gives some more insight on it, is, and I've had this in the pre-season briefings where people assume because of the bow thrusters, the tunnel thrusters, and all the horsepower these ships are equipped with, they are just super manoeuvrable. Bow thrusters are only effective at very low speeds. Those tunnel thrusters are only effective at speeds. It depends on the ship, but I'm going to say generally under about 4.5, 5 knots. So the notion that they're used when the ship's at speed, and they're the be-all and end-alls, a bit of a misnomer. I'm not sure if that helps in answering the question, but if you want to ask me again or make it a bit more simpler for me, because I'm a simple sailor, I'll do my best to answer it. I can't hear you, James.
You're on mute, James.
What impact has COVID-19 lockdown had on the number of size of shipping movements in Sydney and Port Botany?
Okay, so the big ticket item there is obviously the cruise ships. So no cruise ships, which are a huge part of our work. There's no cruise ships. The knock-on effect from that has been the fuel oil trade is down. So there's less tankers coming to Sydney bringing in fuel oil. The bunker barges then, of course, aren't supplying cruise ships. So they've actually been tied up and their crews are being laid off as we speak. So the tanker trade is down. In Botany, the tanker trade is down also because of jet fuel to the airport. There's no planes, so there's less jet fuel coming in. The container trade, I can't be sure of the numbers, but just from my oversight of it, it seems we seem to be getting a lot larger ships, so maybe a few less ships, but the volume isn't that greatly reduced. Where the big notice is obviously cruise ships, there are none. They'll be back soon, but the tanker market is down as well.
Next question is, do you use drones at all, or just cameras on the bow and stern?
We don't, just cameras on the bow and stern. Drones have been quite interesting because you get used to the lights you see at night, as you're moving in and out of the harbour, and then you get also used to the lights you might expect from traffic. So I've been doing jobs at night and you see these funny red and green lights and it freaks you out. And then now we're just sort of starting to get used to the idea that there are drones in there and it's becoming something a little bit more normal. But we don't use them for our purposes.
Next question is, why do we not have more official waypoints rather than just your personal ones?
We do, sorry. So we have official tracks. We do. So I carry out a PPU, portable pilotage unit, or with my own navigational software, we have standard tracks for entry in and out of the port. And 9 times out of 10, you will use the standard tracks, but the pilotage is, you assess the risk before you go out on the job, but you have to be a dynamic risk assessor. Circumstances change, things change. Sometimes your equipment may not work and you may be reliant on marks, leads, and I hate to use the expression, but they say the Mark 1 eyeball, where you know it's completely eyeball pilotage. So we do have standard tracks, we do have standard manoeuvres, and we do have standard procedures. But as you can appreciate, with the variability of weather conditions, traffic, issues with the ship, things can change, and you then have to rely on your marks or other options. So the things we use are, you know, maybe personal to each pilot, but when you, for instance, in Port Botany, the manoeuvre in and out of the dock in Port Botany, there's some fabulous marks there, and there's 3 different methodologies you can use, but when you put them all on the chart, they all match up, but you've just got that in your back pocket. They always say pilots either pilot by numbers or by feel, and I like to pilot by feel, but it's great to know that if you do become disorientated, you've got those marks in your back pocket to rely on to get you back on track.
There's one more. Why is there such a small amount of time available for you to come to terms with the ship's characteristics, rather than being available from a database that you can download prior to going on board the ship?
So it's a good question. What the ship's characteristics are general. So when we go to Port Ash and when we simulate things, you have a general idea of the type of ship and how it will manoeuvre. The ship, the detail that comes to us, we have the bones of the detail. So the shape of the ship, the length of the ship, the power of the main engine, the power of the thrust of the wind air, things like that. When you get on the ship, some things might be different. So the draft of the ship, the trim, that's variable, that changes. So you're only updated with that information once you get on board, and then you may have to adjust your thinking a bit. But you'll have a general idea before you go out there, but the specific information, they may have tested the main engine just prior to arrival to the port. So one of the requirements, test the engine astern, then realise there's a problem or something's changed, or so you will have the majority of the detail before you go out there, and once you arrive, then you'll get the finer tuned variable parts of the information. And I will say vice versa, you know, the questions then asked, well, why do we go out with the passage plan, present it to them, and then they've only got 5 minutes to look at that before we come into the port. So we are sending the information out to ships now, but the problem with ships is the limited amount of information you can send. You're talking about technology that doesn't really keep up with the world ashore, and you're talking about satellite internet links. You can't send large parcels of information out to ships. So we're sort of limited in what we can do in that regard. But it is advancing, and we are improving the way we share information prior to doing jobs, so that there's a better understanding across the whole bridge team on the ship with the pilot about what what it is we're trying to achieve.
Excellent. Well, that's all our questions for tonight. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah. Luke, just a little bit of feedback. There's been, during the course of the evening, a whole bunch of comments that have come up, just saying wonderful things about your presentation. Thanks, Luke. I'm in awe of the task. Fascinating to hear your insights. Fantastic presentation. Thank you. Not a question, just wanted to say how absolutely fascinating the presentation was, and thanks. So that just gives you, not just from me, Luke, but from all the others participating, just I guess a vote of appreciation of how much we've enjoyed tonight. And in some ways, I guess it's a little bit sorry that we can't be a little bit more casual and, you know, catch up with you over dinner and, you know, ask a few more questions. But for tonight, I think you've done a fabulous job. We thoroughly enjoyed it. And the cruising division owe you a bottle of wine. for when you come back to the club, hopefully for the presentation that you're going to do at the beginning of the season, which is in, I'm not sure, I think it's in, is it sometime in August? Anyway,
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, look forward to catching up and seeing you in person. But look, thank you very much, much appreciated. Have a safe trip back from Queensland, and look forward to seeing you at the club.
Thanks, folks. It was my pleasure, and
yeah.
thanks for indulging me, and yeah, hope to see you all in the flesh soon.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you all for coming along tonight on the screen, and I hope you enjoyed it all. It was great to be able to, for the cruising division, to put on such a popular show. Thanks to Luke. A round of virtual applause to you, Luke. That's fantastic.
Thanks, guys. Okay. Thanks. All the best.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye.